It's 5 o'clock on Friday night, so you know what time it is. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Last week I didn't go live because I was out house hunting, which I'm still not completely done with. Moving from the Sacramento area further west, going into basically into Sonoma County. I've got a couple houses I'm looking at. I just got off the phone actually with one of the property managers. One of the houses, and I can have the house if I want it. It's like right off the main drag of, Sonoma Wine Trail off of Highway 12. Vineyards all over the place, beautiful hills, golf course, you name it, it's there. Beautiful, beautiful place. My main challenges I have is it's about 30-minute drive to work. It has like white carpeting. I'm a big fan of white carpeting. I'm getting picky in here, right? But it's a really, really nice place. The other place is in Windsor, only 10 minutes from where I'll be working. One of my coworkers will be right down the road. Bigger house, 3-bedroom, all hardwood floors throughout the entire house. I like that. The area is still very, very, very nice. It's not necessarily surrounded by golf course, and I don't play golf, and vineyards, but it's still very, 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 very nice. So it's convenience, bigger place. I like the flooring. I like the house more than, or the other place is it's a beautiful landscape, beautiful area. I mean, it's basically you're living in a vacation spot, right? So which do you go for? The place that's really close to work or the place that's a little further out, but it's a nice place to live? Do you go for the bigger house? That's sort of the dilemma. So hopefully by Monday or Tuesday, excuse me, I just got a real dry throat, but we can fix that. Just drinking some water here. So that's what I'm doing right now. So I didn't go live last week. I'm done house hunting and I'll have a secure home by next Tuesday. And then is the hassle of moving, right? I've been packing. I still got to pack all this stuff, which I'll be doing this weekend. So we're wrapping up the series on sherry and sherry cask finished whiskeys. My last video, I have 2 videos coming up on Palo Cantado. One of the videos will post on this coming Sunday. The next one will post next Wednesday. That'll finish Palo Cantado. The Palo Cantados are, one is the Bunnahabhain Palo Cantado, which will be post next Wednesday. And the other one is, my mind's going blank at the moment as to what the heck it is. It's actually a Dewar's 27-year-old blended Scotch finished in Palo Cantado cask. That'll post on Tuesday. So, what else got going on? So, because I'm moving, new house, new job, got to get settled in. I'm going to take at least a month off. So I won't be posting any more videos after this series for at least a month. And I'm taking a month off from doing live streams. And it's summertime. Traffic typically gets a little lower. People take time off, long evenings, so people aren't necessarily hanging out. During COVID times, it's been a little bit better. So I won't be, it's a good time to take a break. Roy, right? He had his he takes a break, Aquavite. He had his, for the season, he had his last live stream on Thursday, and he's going to takes a month off. He takes a month off every year. So we'll both be off for a month. So I'm going to be doing 2 different whiskeys tonight. One I've already had. I opened this last night, but I'm going to work on it a little bit tonight. And the other one, I just pulled the wrapper off. Let me say hello to everybody who's in the room real quick, and then we'll move on. Donna Cask Whisky, how you doing? IC86, how you doing? Machero 2000, Debbie, I'm trying to think, Dalme, if I pronounce that correctly. Michael Gonzalez, how you doing? Michael Hassler, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Steve A, thanks for tuning in. So I've already had, this is the Breckenridge whiskey. It has it's basically like a bourbon, but it's not aged in a new oak cask, but it has a high rye bourbon mash. It says high rye bourbon mash aged for a minimum of 3 years charred and new American oak barrels finished in PX casks. But they just put whiskey, even though it's a bourbon mash, but it's not technically a bourbon. I think it's probably because of the casking. Opened this already last night. Really, really like it. But I'm going to pour myself a little bit of the Rabbit Hole. This is Rabbit Hole, a Derringer straight bourbon whiskey finished in PX sherry cask, bottled at 46.5% alcohol by volume or a 93 proof. I'll pour myself a little bit of this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about PX, talk a little bit about these whiskeys. I'm not going to do a formal review because I need to get into these a little bit. But this weekend, hopefully, I'll wrap up the reviews on these, and those will post. So even though I'm going to be off for a month, videos will post on Sunday, next Wednesday, and then another one the weekend after that, and then the next one will be the Wednesday after that. So there should be videos for the next couple of weeks still going to be posted on the channel, but I won't be doing a live stream. You know, it takes a little while to get settled in, to get things unpacked, to get all this set up again, and then new job, new place, new function. I want to be able to focus on work and mentally focus on work, and probably putting on some extra hours just to get caught up on everything that's going on. So it smells like a bourbon. MSB 1791. Thanks for tuning in. Tom O'Donnell. Thanks for tuning in. So it has the bourbon character. It turns up the oak character, and I picking up the corn notes, the spice notes, nutmeg, cinnamon, vanilla, a lot of cinnamon. So it has that very distinctive bourbon character to it, and that's just on the nose. So I've mentioned this a number of times in my videos. I like, when it comes to sherry cask or sherry cask finished whiskeys, I don't want the sherry to just override everything. Sherry, I think Scotch typically does better with sherry cask. The Wild Turkey Oloroso, which I reviewed, I like it, but when I initially had it, if you haven't seen my video, it seemed like the struggle for dominance between the bourbon cask and the sherry cask was there. So I had Scott from Scotch Test Dummies on 2 weeks ago. We talked about this a little bit because bourbon is aged in a new cask. You have huge new charred oak bourbon character, and now the sherry has to sort of compete with that. So you may like it, you may not like it. I personally tend to find that it was a little bit competing with that, which is why I think if Breckenridge has a high rye bourbon mash, but they weren't using the new oak as like a bourbon would, then you're getting a better deliverance of the sherry cask influence, and yet still having a bourbon-like spirit underneath it. And I kind of like that. So I would say, even though I've only done a neck pour thus far, I really, really liked it. But right now, kind of jump on the rabbit hole. So I'm going to put a post to a video. Watch it some other time if you want to. I'm going to put a post to a video in the chat. I would like to show it during my live stream, but I would probably get hit with a copyright strike or something like that, and I don't want to do that. But if you want to watch it later, and I'll put it probably in the link down below, this is a video for Rabbit Hole Derringer, and it's them talking about the cooperation between the bodega, for which they got the cask, and this whiskey. Whiskey Straight Out, how you doing? He says, hey, buddy, good to see you on again, live again. Cheers. Thank you very much. Let me take a little sip here. I need to get this itchy throat. So these are both whiskey mash. This one, bourbon mash, but this one's an actual bourbon. And I can definitely, I can tell the PX influence, Pedro Jimenez influence, but the Rabbit Hole distinctively has that bourbon character of the new charred oak. That's the main thing, and I think that's the main thing that is a challenge with a PX cask. So 46.5% alcohol by volume. On the side, it says twice finished in new toasted or charred American oak barrels and Pedro Jimenez sherry casks, never chill filtered as it should be. So that's cool. So no artificial coloring and no chill filtering, which is really, really cool. The Breckenridge, I like, man, all the information is right on the label. It says high rye bourbon mash aged for a minimum of 3 years in charred new American oak barrels. Oh, wait a minute. They do have new American oak barrels. Finished in PX casks. So why is it not a bourbon? I don't know. And this is batch number 6, and this is bottled at 45%. So in terms of, man, okay, now I got more questions. I was thinking they didn't use new oak. I'm wrong about that. They did use new charred oak. Now I'm curious because the charred oak bourbon character doesn't show up. Maybe it's because of the high rye mash bill. So I'm curious, and now I got more questions. But I'll look into it and I'll address that in the video when I review it. But I would say definitely that new American charred oak character is really short. Steve A says, because once it's finished, it's no longer meets the definition of a bourbon. But there are plenty of bourbons. Hello. This says it's a bourbon. It says it's a bourbon. It says straight bourbon whiskey finished in PX sherry cask. So if it's no longer meets the definition of bourbon, then how can they say that? I think the legal definition is it has to say finished in. So why doesn't this say high rye bourbon? Because it says high rye bourbon mash. But here it just says whiskey, PX cask finish. So why doesn't it say, bourbon, PX cask finish the way the rabbit hole does? Steve A says, no, that's straight bourbon whiskey finished in a PX cask. So why didn't this? So this is straight bourbon, yes. Why couldn't this just say bourbon, not straight bourbon finished in a PX cask? So I am not a bourbon aficionado. I like bourbon. I've got bourbons. I'm always willing to learn more about bourbon. If Jason Mash and Drum or someone like that was around, I'm sure Jason could give me a really good answer on it. Adam T says, bourbon sold in the United States must be produced in the U.S. Yes. 51% corn is stored in a new container charred oak cask. Yeah, Adam, you haven't said anything you don't already know, and you haven't said anything that this doesn't meet that criteria. So I'm going to see if I can bring up some of these comments. Let me go to the comments. Okay. So here's Adam. Bourbon sold in the United States must be produced in the U.S. from, yes, 51% corn. Yes, I know that. You haven't. So both of these meet that criteria. Mike Hassler. Going to be doing a taste test tonight. New girl. I don't want to hear about your girlfriend, dude. Nothing personal. Steve A says, it's like, why is Jack Daniels not included as bourbon? It is a bourbon because they choose to label it as Tennessee whiskey. In that case, Breckenridge chose not to sell it as bourbon finishing. Okay, now that would make sense. That would make sense. So I already did a short video on why Jack Daniels, in terms of NAFTA licensing, in terms of the code, the code for when you put it on the shelf and all that, it's all classified as a bourbon. It's all classified as a bourbon. So legally, it's a bourbon. They chose, as you said, to not call it a bourbon. Okay, if that's the only thing, is they just chose not to call it a bourbon, then that's completely understandable. That's completely understandable. But the funny thing is, when I picked it up at the store, the guy said, it can't be legally called a bourbon. It doesn't meet the requirements for a bourbon. And he said to me, and I said, I'll look it up later. So I see 86. It was a bourbon then finished in sherry cask. Yes, this is true. This is true. This is a straight bourbon. This is technically still a bourbon then finished in PX cask. Not providing any new information here. Anyway, so we can go on and on. So, taking out a sip. I'm trying to remember. Both of these are under $100. This was like $60 to $70. The Breckenridge $60, $70, and I think the rabbit hole was also basically $70. So yeah, so the difference is one chose to put bourbon and the other one chose not to. So they just made a different choice. Okay, so it's not a legal thing. It's just call it whiskey to be safe, as the professor says. Anyway, so it's just a matter of choice. If that's the way it is, then it makes sense. I thought there was a legal requirement something there, but there was not. Anyway, I would say this much. The rabbit hole is much more distinctively bourbon on the character, on the palate, than the... You know what? I'm going to get another glass and do it side by side. All right? Let's do this. I'm going to put a little bit of the Breckenridge in here. Because these are, of course, this is a high rye. This is a high rye. So there's that distinction there. Donna Pass says, would it be interesting to know if the mash bill was under 51% corn, and that may be it. No, because it says a high rye bourbon mash bill. They wouldn't call it a high rye bourbon mash bill if it wasn't a mash bill. If it was less than 51%, they couldn't put on here high rye bourbon mash. It would be a high rye mash, not a high rye, not a bourbon mash. So it's a good thinking, but they said it's not a high rye mash. It's a high rye bourbon mash. So the mash means 51% corn or more. In fact, I don't have I'll have to look up the notes. I have them on my video and I created it. So it's got a bourbon mash bill. Interesting way to start this and discussing this, but let me just do side by side real quick. So this is the Breckenridge. This actually, this reminds me of the old Bookers. It reminds me of an old Booker's, not the more recent bottlings, but like, maybe the kitchen table or something like that. It reminds me of a Booker's put into a PX cask. The Breckenridge, the bourbon character isn't popping out. It's there once you get it on the palate. Now the rye is really showing up. But the Breckenridge, it's fruitier, more blueberry, blackberry, fruit, cassis. It actually, if you guys are familiar with Zinfandel, if someone told me this was aged in a Zinfandel cask rather than Pedro Jimenez, I would believe it. It's very jammy. It's very sweet. Loads of vanilla, particularly about 3/4 of the way back. So it has a very Zinfandel character to it. The Rabbit Hole has more of that very distinctive bourbon character to it, with a little added nuance of some of those black fruit notes, those jammy notes on the back end. All right. So, sherry and sherry cask finished whiskeys. So we did Fino, Manzanilla, Amontillado, Oloroso. Currently doing the Palo Cantado. A video will post on, I already did one, the Navarenzi, whatever, the Spanish corn-based Spanish grain whiskey, aged in Palo Cantado. Fantastic whiskey. If you haven't seen my video, sorry, that was a chair. Palazzi. It's hard to remember how to pronounce it. If you haven't seen that review, that's an absolutely superb whiskey. It's going to make my top 10 for 2021. Check that one out. Really, really fantastic whiskey. So Sunday will be my next Palo Cantado, and then Wednesday will be the final Palo Cantado with the Bunnahabhain. And then I'll be reviewing these two Pedro Jimenez cask whiskeys. So we're wrapping up our series on sherry and sherry cask finished whiskeys. So as I said before, because I'm moving and everything else, this has been my last live stream for the month. So this is actually my last live stream for this series on sherry and sherry cask finished whiskeys. So I want to talk a little bit about Pedro Jimenez and something very interesting. So I put that link in there earlier, and you can check that out. I'll probably put it down below later on. So the rabbit hole, it doesn't say PX. If you can see that, it says PX Sherry Cask. Sherry Cask. Doesn't just say PX Cask. Oops, crackling the plastic there. This one says PX Cask Finish. Now look at this one. Yep. Okay, it says PX Cask Finish, but then down here in the smaller label, it says PX Sherry. Now, sherry, we think, oh, sherry is a wine. Sherry is a place. It's like Champagne is a place. So along the 50th parallel, sort of northeast France, you have the Champagne region. There's 3 subregions of Champagne. You can't call a sparkling wine that's not from Champagne a Champagne, right? It's become a legal designation, protected designation area. In France, they call it an AOC, Appellation Original Contrôlée. In Spain, they call it a denomination origin, a DO. So it's a protected designation. Now, there are some American wine producers who've been making sparkling wine for decades before it became a protected designation, and they may call it a California Champagne. But those wines cannot be exported to the EU. To the EU. So they may still call it a Champagne here in the United States, but most producers, particularly here in California, have dropped the word Champagne. So Champagne is a place. In the same way, sherry is a place, also known as Jerez, spelled Xeres, or Jerez. So it's 3 different spellings for the place. Is a protected designated area. I'm going to bring up a map so you can know what I'm talking about. Okay. So you're looking at the map here. If you look over to the left, you have Cadiz, you have Jerez, you have Manzanilla de Sanlúcar. So Manzanilla is where where Manzanilla is from. And Jerez, you have the Jerez Triangle, the 3 cities there. If you look further to the right, or if you go east, you see Malaga, right? Which has a purple and sort of light green colors. And above Malaga, you go up above, and there's a purple area south of Cordoba. And if you notice, it's designated as Montilla Morelos. So the Montilla Morelos is written down there in the ocean. So most Pedro Jimenez is coming from Montilla Morelos or Malaga. That's not Jerez. That is not sherry region. If a wine is coming from Malaga or Montilla Morelos, it's not coming from sherry region. It's not a sherry. It's not a sherry. Okay. So let me close this up here. Dun, dun, dun. So in France, this is how designated origin, DOs, or appellation origin controllees work. Or AVAs, American Viticulture Areas, work here in the United States. So in France, if a sparkling wine is made from outside of the Champagne region, they call it a Cremant. So you have Cremant de Bourgogne, right? So same grapes as Champagne, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, Cremant de Bourgogne or Cremant de Burgundy, but they can't call it Champagne because it's come from Burgundy. You have Cremant de Loire, which is made with Chenin Blanc, right? You have actually Cremant de Bordeaux. You have sparkling wine. Yes, Bordeaux produces sparkling wine. A lot of people don't know that, but yes, you can get a sparkling wine from Bordeaux. It's called Cremant de Bordeaux. Usually it's going to be lesser grapes that weren't good enough that you wanted to make your table wine with, so they make a sparkling wine with it. That's how that works. Anyway, there are a number of other Cremant regions that make sparkling wine, and they can't call it Champagne because it's a protected designation. So you can have PX, Pedro Jimenez, that's coming from outside of sherry, and technically it's not sherry cask. It's not a sherry cask. If you watch the video for Rabbit Hole, it's a very well done video. They take you back to Spain. They show you the vineyards. They show you the cask being made. They talk about the charting of the cask and so on and so forth. And there's even a scene there where he has a wine glass, and it says on the wine glass, it says Malaga. And as you just saw there on the map there, Malaga is east of the Jerez region. It's east of the sherry region. So the question I have is, taking a little sip. It doesn't have that. So the Breckenridge doesn't have that distinctive, what you expect from a bourbon cask. It's fruitier, jammier, but there's just a very creamy vanilla character to it, which I really, really like. And it's sweet upon sweet. It's sweet all the way through. The Rabbit Hole has a distinctive spice character. I would say new charred oak spice character. That's probably it, for most part it that you expect from a bourbon. Thus far, I like them both. Thus far, I think the PX cask and the spirit are well balanced. It doesn't seem like they just took a bourbon and dumped some PX into it. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. So, when you're looking at a whiskey that says PX sherry cask, there's a possibility it's not actually sherry, a PX sherry. It's actually a Malaga, or it's actually a Montilla Morelos. Now, if I'm wrong on all this, I'd be more than happy to be corrected. If there's some sort of legal loophole that I'm not aware of, I'm more than willing to be corrected on this. But this, from all my wine studies, or somehow something changed. Things changed, by the way. My knowledge of wine is about 5-6 years old. I haven't studied wine in 5 or 6 years. I haven't written any books. I haven't spent a whole lot of time on it. One of the things I want to do after I move is actually start going through my old notes and spending more time sort of reviving my memory. Anyway, so this is a bottle of Glenmorangie, which I'll get into after I get settled in. And if you see the bottom there, it says Malaga cask. So this is a Pedro Jimenez. Now, they also do Muscatel down there. But from the color of it, I'm going to guess that's Pedro Jimenez cask. I think the Scotch 4 Dummies have already reviewed this. I'll get to it when I get to it. So this is a Glenmorangie 12-year-old limited release. But it says, it doesn't say Pedro Jimenez. It just says Malaga. Anyway, so I'm somewhat surprised that if this is Pedro Jimenez coming from outside the Jerez region, that they're calling it sherry. It may be, this is a possibility, that this is not distributed. It's not sold in the EU. If they don't sell this in the EU, right, then they can get away with calling it sherry. There are some American producers of sherry-style wine who call it a sherry, but it's not sold in the EU, right? I know we're getting into some little technical stuff about sherry and protected designations of origin and stuff like that. But so you might buy a sherry cask finished whiskey that's aged in PX sherry cask that technically, legally, it isn't a PX sherry. It's just PX from Montilla Morelos or Malaga, right? Malaga. And I could see why someone would want to put PX cask or Pedro Jimenez cask and not put Malaga, because a lot of people don't know what Malaga is. And so I could see why they would do that. Anyhow, so that's our little, now, I'll do more reading on this. I'll do more looking into it. So Joseph Horton says, so Pedro Jimenez is not sherry. It's sherry if it's from the sherry region. Okay? So if Pedro Jimenez is from sherry, you can call it sherry. If it's from outside of sherry, it's Malaga or Montilla Morelos. Or if you grow it in California, it's from California. It's still Pedro Jimenez. It's just not technically sherry, right? My guess is, for sake of familiarity, and people are familiar with Pedro Jimenez being sherry. Anyway, so yes, Steve A says Pedro Jimenez is a grape varietal. Absolutely correct. which takes us to our quiz. Let's do a quiz because that's sort of an answer to a quiz. All right. That's an answer to our quiz. So let's get into a quiz. And the purpose of my quizzes is to reinforce what I've already covered in my videos. Is not to trip anybody up. If you've watched my videos and paid half attention, these should be fairly simple. Jaime says, anything planned after the Sherry series, Port Madeira or Sauterne? Still working on it. Whatever I do, it's going to be geared towards preparation for exams. However, I've got a number of Texas whiskeys I need to review. I've got some Irish whiskeys I need to review. So I could do another Texas series. I could do another Irish series. I have a bunch of independent bottled Islay whiskeys. So I'm probably going to hold on to the independent Islay until colder weather. I prefer peated whiskeys in colder weather. So I haven't made up my mind. I do want to do a study series that will be conducive to my current studies for the Council of Whiskey Masters, but I haven't exactly figured out what it's going to be. All right, so let's go over a quiz. So get ready for a quiz. Shouldn't be too difficult. Only 6 questions. All righty. So the first one, the 5 types of sherry include all of the following except A, Fino, B, Amontillado, C, Amoroso, D, Oloroso, or E, Pedro Jimenez. All right, so the 5 types of sherry include all the following except A, Fino, B, Amontillado, C, Amoroso, D, Oloroso, Amoroso, D, Oloroso, or E, Pedro Jimenez. And Jaime says C, Adam says C, Steve says C, Mark Milnar says C, Donna Pass Whiskey says C. Got IC86 says E. Now, I might have thrown you a loop with everything I just said, so I might have thrown IC86 a loop there. Michero 2000 says E. Steve A says missing Manzanilla. I can put Manzanilla on there. I cannot put Manzanilla. I asked the 5 types of sherry include all of the following except Manzanilla. Anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know what? You're right. I should have put Manzanilla on there because I've only got 5 answers on there, and I should have put Manzanilla on there. You know what? You're right. That's funny. All right, let me give the answer, and then I'll explain the answer. The answer is B, Amoroso. The answer is B, Amoroso. And let me explain this. So Amoroso is not a type of sherry. Amoroso is the name given to an Oloroso that has PX or Pedro Jimenez put into it. So it's actually not a type. Steve is right. I could have put Manzanilla in there. I should have put Manzanilla in there. You're right. Ding, you get an extra point. You get a brownie point. You're right. Should have put Manzanilla in there. So Amoroso, in fact, Talisker Distiller's Edition has Amoroso in it. Fantastic whiskey. I mean, really, really delicious whiskey. Has Amoroso in it. But Amoroso is just a name they decided to give to an Oloroso that they then put a heavy concentration of Pedro Jimenez in it. So, what did I... Oops. Sorry, I got an error. It should be C, Amoroso. I put B, Amoroso. Sorry. That's funny, man. Typos, man. Typos. Hey, that's a test to see if you're paying attention. See, you passed the test. You get an extra point. I did that on purpose. I did it totally on purpose. That was not a mistake. That was on purpose just to see if you're paying attention. Oh, lordy. Anyway, so all right, you're right. So the answer is Amoroso, regardless of whatever the letters were. Don't ask me how I did that. That's funny. Whiskey and 2 drinks. How you doing? Hitting the sauce early. I'm not hitting the sauce early, but it is unbelievably warm today. We're hitting triple digits all this weekend. Let me see what the temperature is right now. It's currently 109. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of a glare. 109 degrees right now. I have the AC cranked, but it's still pretty warm. It's going to be 111 tomorrow. So probably going to want to put some ice on these puppies. All right. So the answer is Amoroso is not a style or type of sherry. It is a sherry that has been modified until they call it Amoroso. Anyway. All right. So I don't know if you remember of my Facebook group, David Broom's book, The World of Whiskey. So a little while back, I was posting errors in his book. I think I got like 6 or 7 errors in his book. And was posting pictures of them and so forth. So here's a top whiskey dude, with a top publisher with errors in his book. So I'm not beyond David Broom or anybody else to have errors. So I need a good proofreader, really, really good proofreader. So that edition of David's book on the world of whiskey, I think it's 2014. So it's a little out of date. So it definitely, because a lot has happened over the last couple of years in Scotland, definitely needs some updating. For example, it doesn't have Macallan's new distillery in there, right? So it has old data regarding Macallan. So it needs updating, and he needs a good proofreader. Cameron Lochner, thanks for tuning in, man. That's Semper Fi. All right, so next question. So how many errors did Eric do in this quiz? Let's find out. All right, all of the following types of sherry are made from the Palomino grape except A, Fino, B, Amontillado, C, Oloroso, or D, Pedro Jimenez. So which are not made with the Palomino grape? Donna Pass says D. Steve A says D. Jaime says D. Jim Morris says D. Debbie says I'll proofread. Mark says A. Mark's not been watching my videos. IC86 says D. There are no errors, only topics for discussion. Whiskey with 2 drinks. I like that. Oh, man. There are no errors, only topics for discussion. I like that. I'm going to use that one of these days. All right. So Cameron, my fellow jarhead, says D. All righty. Grumpy Old Fart says PX. All right. So the answer is, go back here. The answer is D, Pedro Jimenez, because Pedro Jimenez is made with Pedro Jimenez. All the others are made with the Palomino grape. Which sort of touches on the comment made earlier by Steve A. So good cover. You really can't have an ego. I mean, the more you know, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And the older you get, the more brain farts you have, making mistakes and your brain laps and you get that little circle of death. Like your computer needs to reboot, it's having difficulty gaining the information. That happens a lot. It happens more and more as I get older. So, alrighty. So let's go on to the next one. See, all of the following types of sherry are aged oxidatively. This one might be a little more difficult. All of the following types of sherry are aged oxidatively except. So one of these is aged biologically, and the others are aged oxidatively. And there's one here that someone could argue with me about. And if you can do that, that's a good point for discussion. So A, Fino, B, Amontillado, C, Oloroso, or D, Pedro Jimenez. So Tom says D, Pedro Jimenez. Mark says A. Steve A says A. Nick Keen says B. Cameron A. Jim Morris says A. Joseph Horton says A. Michael Hassler says searching like spirits direct or whatever. I don't know what that means. Matera says A. B is both. Yes, IC86. Yes, IC86. Ding, 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 ding. IC86. There you go. IC86 is correct. Let me bring up the answer real quick. The answer is, so in terms of only, so pheno is only aged, technically speaking, biologically, as IC80. Damn. I'm going to start hitting the cough button. Just allergies. My nose is itching and running and going down my throat. So that's what it's all about. Just allergies. I don't have the vid or anything like that. So, right. So pheno, if you recall correctly from previous videos, it has that layer of floor, which protects the wine from becoming overly oxidative. There is but they keep a headspace in the cask, which is called ullage. So there is a headspace. There is some oxidative notes in there, but you still get some fresh fruit character there. Once you get more apples and pears, but also some dried apples and pear characteristics. The nuttiness doesn't kick in until the back end. So it's primarily biological. IC86 is correct. B starts off like a pheno, then the floor dies off or it's killed off, and then it becomes oxidative. So IC86 was absolutely correct on that, and all the rest are oxidative, which is why with a Pedro Jimenez, immediately up front, you get the oxidative notes is that nuttiness, that nutty character. So that's why it was a pheno, the nuttiness, it's usually like a marzipan or manzanilla. That marzipan doesn't kick into like the back end, whereas with Oloroso and I actually get it with Amontillado, and you definitely get it with and Pedro Jimenez, you get a nuttiness up front, and that's from the oxidative aging. Tasted Blind, I would know this is a finished bourbon. Tasted Blind, the Breckenridge. I didn't get it at first, but I got it later on. After I've had a couple, I start getting the rye notes. So the black licorice, herbal note, kind of slight green note starts to show up. But from a neck pour, and my brother and I both had neck pours last night, wasn't getting that before. I was mostly just getting the intense PX cask. So it's actually opening up a little bit more and getting more of the spirit that's in there, particularly the rye notes. So, alrighty, next question. All right. Next question. Sherry is aged in a fractional blending system. And I've said this multitude times during the series. So the way I teach is repeat for your own memory, but also to let people know this is what would be on a test if you keep repeating over and over again. So sherry's aged in a fractional blending system known as A, a sherry butt, B, the sherry or Jerez triangle, C, a Solera, or D, floor. Steve A says C. Donna Cask Whisky says C. Jaime says C. Cameron, the jarhead, says C. Mark says C. Joseph says C. Everybody's getting C. C. High scores today. C. Yeah, the barrel pyramid. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. Grumpy Old Fart. Yeah, the barrel pyramid. Yeah, that's what a Solera is. C. That's right. Although legally, it doesn't have to be stacked on top of each other. They could be all laid out flat. All right, let's give you the answer real quick. And the answer is C, a Solera. So technically, typically if you Google images, Solera, you see that barrels stacked on top of each other. And if you watch videos, you can see them using it's like a wine thief, and they're taking sherry out to test it. And you can see them. It's kind of like siphoning gas, out of a tank. That's how they get the wine out of a cask to go from one cradera to another cradera to another cradera. But technically, the casks don't have to be stacked on top of each other. They typically are, as you see in the photos and video, but they don't have to. So you could have first criteria, and then over here put the second criteria, and third, and then so you could do it that way. They don't have. There's no legal requirement to stack on top of each other. They just traditionally are. So if you were trying to do a Solera in that fashion in California, you might not stack them up top of each other because of earthquakes. Possibility, or you'd have to have a really good racking system that would be a little bit more secure. But anyway, alrighty. So that was question number 4, I think. All right. Question number 5: the thin film of yeast that protects Manzanilla sherry from becoming overly oxidized is known as A, a bodega, B, phenome, C, flor, or D, a solera. I'm going to read that again. A thin film of yeast that protects Manzanilla sherry from becoming overly oxidized is known as A, a bodega, B, phenome, C, flor, or D, a solera. What do we got here? All righty. Machero says C, IBC 86 says C, Cameron says C, Mark says C, Jaime says C, Donna Pass says, did you feel that yesterday's earthquake? Yes, it's funny. So we had an earthquake yesterday. It was actually in Nevada. It was a 5.9, which is huge. That's a huge earthquake. So yeah, I was laying on my bed taking a nap, and I felt the shake. In fact, my brother was asking me about that earlier today. But yeah, I felt it. So it's in Nevada. We're in California, and yet we could feel it from here. That's quite something. So everybody is saying C. All right. So everybody's saying C. Yep, felt the earthquake. And the answer is C, flor. So if you notice, I said that protects Manzanilla. I wanted to use flor as an answer. Excuse me, pheno as an answer and B. And I thought maybe I might be able to confuse some people. So that's why I put Manzanilla in the question and put pheno as an answer. But yes, it's flor. There you go. All righty. So next question, number 6, this is our last question. The most common type of cask used to age Scotch whiskey is A, Amontillado, B, bourbon, C, Oloroso, or D, Pedro Jimenez. What is the most common type of cask used to age Scotch whiskey? And while you guys are thinking about that, all righty. Let's see what people got here. What's the most common type of cask? Read the question carefully. Nope. Didn't fit. Donovan says B. Mr. Great Shot. Oh, how you doing, sir? No, I don't think I've seen you before. B. Debbie says B. Joseph Horton says B for the win. Nick says B. Mark says C. Oloroso. IC86 says B. Clint Hickey says C. Grumpy Old Fart says Thai bourbon, then Oloroso. Michael Hoster says, well, nothing has ever been beaten Lagavulin 16 yet since I've been drinking Scotch. Okay. All right. So you have to read the question carefully. I didn't write what is the most common type of sherry cask. I just asked what type is the most common cask. The answer is B, bourbon. The answer is B, bourbon. Now, the most common type of sherry cask would be Oloroso. So if you didn't read it carefully, then you might have said Oloroso, but it's actually bourbon. So I just got myself some ice, and I am going to put a little bit of this on ice. And I've already had the Breckenridge on ice. I poured myself a huge pour right now. A bit much. Probably because I put too many ice cubes in there because I need to cover up the ice cubes. So I did it on purpose because one of the things I've emphasized and said multiple times during the series is 90% of the cask in Scottish warehouses is bourbon. The other 10%, mostly sherry. Of course, there's also going to be some port cask and some various other wine, red wine cask, Sauternes cask. But those will probably all make up less than 1%. I would imagine 9% It's actually sherry cask. So, mm, mm, mm. So I like to test a whiskey several different ways. Neat, with a little bit of water and on ice. And it being 109 degrees today, I like to have it on ice. I am a big fan of bourbon on ice, as long as it's a higher ABV, so you're not totally killing it with the ice. And there's actually no filtering. If you don't do any filtering and stuff like that, right, as the rabbit hole is, dropping the temperature drops some of the spirit notes, so maybe corn notes, but I find it increases the cask notes. So you get a bigger punch of sherry cask. With your regular bourbons, you get a bigger punch of the vanilla and the baking spices off of a new charred bourbon cask. And with the extra vanilla and you cool it down, it comes across to me as like, oh, sometimes, particularly maybe more of the ones without rye, the bourbons without a high rye content, they come across to me as like a melted vanilla ice cream or French vanilla ice cream, and I absolutely love it. So, really, really nice. There's a slight viscous mouthfeel. It's almost like you could take the whiskey and put it between your hands, and it'd be like a soap, in terms of texture. It has a nice, glossy, soapy. Soapy sounds like a negative. It doesn't taste like soap or smell like soap, but just in terms of like that liquid soap feel to it, that's what it feels on the palate. Spices now are popping. The Pedro Jimenez cask, the PX cask, is just popping, and the spice notes are really, really popping right now. Really, really nice. This is sweet all the way through. Both of these are really, really, really sweet, but I think bourbon in general, this tends to be sweeter. You might find a bourbon that gets a nutty note on the back end, give you something to contrast. Pretty like some of my like peanut butter character, some contrast with all the sweetness to it. But bourbons, and I think this is one of the reasons why bourbons are so popular. There's generally speaking, you can find a lot of under $30, $40 bourbons that are good quality that Americans can afford. I think that's one reason. More availability, more familiarity. They're not as puzzling, perhaps, for the new whiskey drinker. But I think particularly people growing up drinking a lot of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, that kind of a thing, who have a generality towards sweeter things, are going to tend to go towards a sweeter spirit, a whiskey, and sweeter wines, fruitier wines as well. And I think that's one of the things that draws people more towards a bourbon. And culturally, the bourbon community is just booming. They're doing really, really well. I think Dan and Sean are doing a fantastic job in building their community. Jason Masterjum's doing a fantastic job. Matt Porter is doing a fantastic job. I think Matt Porter could be the like a game show host. Alex Trebek. He could be the Alex Trebek of of the whiskey world or the bourbon world. If you watch his live streams and when he has multiple people on and they're playing games and stuff, whatever they're doing, he's an excellent host and moderator in between it, but he does a really, really great job on that. Mike Bennett, how you doing, man? How you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Not hell. Anyway, so thus far, I would say I like these whiskeys. It's not taking a ton of time for them to open up. I like the general profile of them. I think they do this sort of an early review. I think they show the PX cask fairly well. I think these whiskeys do a better job with the PX than the Wild Turkey did with the Oloroso. Now, in some sense, it's apples and oranges because you're talking Oloroso versus Pedro Jimenez. But I think in terms of the style of wine, Pedro Jimenez being sweet, I think this is my personal perception. I think it plays better with a spirit that's generally sweet. Bourbons generally being sweeter than Scotch or Irish. And I think the sweeter cask plays well with the sweeter whiskey. And I think PX is working better in my limited experience. I think it's working better, playing well better with a bourbon mash than an Oloroso. I would like to see Wild Turkey. Let me take another sip. I would like to see Wild Turkey do another Master's Keep or just another bottling using PX. If Wild Turkey did a PX cask, I'm not aware of it. So if somebody's watching us on the replay and they did a PX cask, let me know. I'll keep an eye out for it. Donner Pass said earlier he said he'd picked up a Cahoman PX cask. I'd kind of like to get my hands on that one as well. I'll have to keep my eyes out for it. I think he said it was a new release of 2021. So I'll keep my eyes open for that one as well. Really, really nice. Alrighty. So in case you didn't catch earlier, once I review these two whiskeys, so I have a review coming out on the Palo Cantado aged whiskey, cask aged whiskey on Sunday. Next Wednesday will be the Bunnahabhain Palo Cantado cask. Then my reviews of these will post in the following weeks. But this is my last live stream for at least a month. It may go longer than that. Donner Pass says K&L has it. For those who don't know, K&L, there's 3 K&Ls. There's one in San Francisco, one in Redwood City, and the other one is in Los Angeles. All right, so I'll take a look at that. I'll see if I can get my hands on a bottle. Or there's a local shop here I like to buy from. Maybe he can get me a bottle as well. But I'll be moving pretty quick. So the reason why I need to take time off, but moving to a house, new job, need to take some time off to just sort of take a break. Alrighty, so I think this is it for this week's live stream. I like to keep it to about an hour. If you're watching the replay, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, if you have any whiskeys, PX Cask whiskeys, perhaps you would like to recommend, or if you have any comments on earlier what I made about Breckenridge and how they're labeling their whiskey, go ahead and leave a comment down below. And if you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, and I hope everyone has an absolutely fantastic weekend. It's gonna be hot. Triple scores in the temperatures this weekend. So, alrighty, and I hope to see you again soon. I know I will miss everyone for a month, but I will be keeping myself super busy. And hopefully next time I'll go live, I'll be going live for my new digs. All right, until next time, cheers.